Yeah, good afternoon, student. So today we continue our second session on object-oriented programming system. So in morning session, we take a look of object, then class, then the template of class. Okay, I just share screen. So this point we cover in morning session basically. So the main purpose of object-oriented programming language is to maintain the security. Then second main motto of object-oriented programming, or the feature, we can see it's a modularized way. The program is in modularized way, so we can easily find the error, or we can rectify or debug the error if there is any issue. And the third one is it's good for the large size programming. Okay, because in procedure oriented programming, basically enhance is given on logic, and in object oriented programming, the enhance is given on data. So to maintain the security, because data is important thing for any organization, so to maintain that, we follow some security measures, and for the same purpose, the main concern is come in the picture, that is the access specifier. So public, private, and protected, these all are the access specifier. So likewise, class is a basic block, we can say, of object-oriented programming, and object is the runtime entity. So in morning session, we done some program also where we calculate the marks, we judge where the student are pass or fail. Depending on the status of pass or fail, we calculate the percentage of the student. So these all things we are conducted in the morning session. In morning session, now the time is to discuss some concept of object-oriented programming system, or we can say the basic features of object-oriented programming system. So when we talk about the features of object-oriented programming system, so there are the different types of features of object-oriented programming. So very first one is polymorphism. Polymorphism is the features. So in this we can say that it is the feature, so in which more than one form is possible. Polymorphism is nothing but the more than one form. May related to program, it may related to function. Okay. So for polymorphism in object-oriented programming system, so two concepts are there. One is overloading, and another one is overriding. Overloading and overriding are the two main concept of polymorphism. Okay, so when we talk about the overloading, so in overloading function name is same, but argument or maintain the parameter which we are passing for the passing to function. So argument is a parameter list, you can say, are different. and in overriding function and function name argument both are same. Function argument list both are same. Okay. These are the concept of overriding. The second feature is of abstraction. So it is again important. Abstraction. So in abstraction, we can say that it is the concept of height complexity of the program. Height complexity of the program. So in abstraction, we just hide the complexity and only function definition are available. Okay. So abstraction is used to hide the complexity of the program. It just allows the function definition. So it provides the feature that we need not to bother about written inside the function. What are the name of that function? It will just fill the definition, and you have to just send the parameters and like in C language, get strcp or strcat. So if you know this function name also, so then also you can directly execute that specific function. You need not to bother about what are inside that function mechanism. So advance of reusability. Reusability is use of existing code. So it gives future to use existing code. Okay. So to implement the reusability, we use concept of inheritance. So inheritance allow the ex, allow inherit parent class of a child class, or we can say it's a subclass also. So we can inherit the features of the parent class into the child class or in the subclass, but only the functions which are written in the public section can inherit private section or the data member or the code written in the private section but cannot be inherited. So these are the some concept of object-oriented programming system. Well, later on we have to discuss that is the dynamic binding. In dynamic binding, the code associated to procedure call is not known until the runtime. Okay, so what code are executed it not known till the runtime of the program, or we can say that the code which have to be executed it may change at the runtime of the program. So so it's the feature of the dynamic. binding. So these are the some basic concepts, basic features of object-oriented programming system. So you just see how these different types of program will how the features we have to implement in our programming system. So we now move towards the programming system. Till if you have any issue or if you have any doubt, so you can ask me. Then we will move towards the programming part. Okay. So okay, till time if you have any issue, you can ask me. If you have any doubt. So first thing, am I audible? Am I audible or not? Hello. Okay. So we go towards the programming part. So this is what about the morning session. We will cover a simple program where we just see about the data members or class member, then the member function, and then we create some type of objects. Here we are use the array of an object to call this all methods. So at a time we can enter the marks, number of student marks, or can display it. So now same way we are right hash include I have stream.h as the example of class sample. We define to data member, let's say int. num1 and num2. Now in public part, if we define some function add, it again receive variable n1 and int n2. Okay. Now whatever value are in n1, we have to assign it into the num1. Whatever at num2, we are going to assign into num. And then we just define one variable int sum that is equal to num1 plus num2. Now one more thing, object-oriented programming provides a facility that you can declare the variable at any place. Okay, so here we just print cout. Okay, summation of integer, and rest was the answer in the sum. First, we define now we call this function add. Okay, so as type is in type of data, so you have to pass two values. One is 20, another one is 30. But as it's object-oriented programming, so whenever you have to call the function, so you have to create the object class, so sample s1, and this object will call this add function, so s1 dot add. Okay, and then we just complete here get ch printf this program one.cpp. Now when we compile, so presently no error. So the summation is 50, 20 plus 30, because the summation is 50. Okay. So compile and run. So the summation of integer is 50. So this is the program where we just define some add function and it receive the integer type of data. Okay, and after performing the addition, it will print. Okay, now what I have to do, I again define the same type of function add, but now we just change a data type. It's a float. So we define the variable name if num1, if num2. Now same type of function we are going to create. Everything is same. But changes only, instead of int we are going to define a float. For float, fnum1, fnum2. Now it's a feature of object oriented. You can initiate the variable at any time at any place. So only to declare at the first only. Now for float, we call the add function. Here we pass the argument 45.67. Create one more object s2. So when we save, here we just made some changes. Instead of add, we are use the variable fadd. And also fadd. And run. So we get values. Here there is some okay. So here we use variable fnum1 and fnum2. So it's fnum1 and fnum2. So here we get the value 80 point something. So for summation you have to use sum fnum1 and fnum2. Okay. So basically this is the program where we using the different types of data type and used to store the value. Okay. Here we use two different functions. One is the add, another one is the fadd. One are using to add the integer type of value, and other one is used to add a float type of value. Depending on the what argument we are passing and the name of the function, the respective function will call, it will use to print that specific value after calculation. So likewise, we can use to concatenate the two string also. So for that we have to use the data type character type, that is a char ch1 and ch2. One more feature which we have to be remain to be discussed. So that is a operator overloading. Likewise in dynamic binding. So one more feature we have to use, that is a operator overloading. So operator overloading is what? It's the concept where we can overload the operator. That means we can use the operator to perform the task rather than it's pre-specified. Means no dot operator is used to perform the task which are assigned to it, that is addition for addition of number, subtraction for subtraction of number, multiplication, then likewise. But when we are used the addition operator, that is a plus operator, plus operator when we are going to use for concatenate to string. So when we use the operator, addition operator to concatenator to string, that means rather than addition of two numbers, when we are used to addition of two string, so it is the example of operator overloading. So it's example of operator overloading. So at that time we can say that we are going to perform the operator overloading task. So it is a all one about operator overloading. So if you have any issue or any doubt, so you can ask me, no problem. So I just give a 5 to 10 minutes before going to start the next part. Okay, so we will continue with the next program. In next program, now we are going to discuss about the object communication, how object will communicate with each other. Okay, so if we and the second thing is, can we pass object as an argument? So to cover these two topics, we are going to um, take a look of one program. So very simple program, we are going to add two complex number. So when we to add to a complex number, so we have to add the real part of the number with the real and imaginary part of the number with the imaginary part. Okay, so in this way we can add two uh, complex number, real with real and imaginary with imaginary. So first we are uh, create two private data members, that is real part and imaginary part. Okay, and we create a class complex. So hash include iostream.h. Another one hash include conio.h. Okay, now class complex. So private part, private, there are two parts, real and imaginary. So float real and imaginary. Then public void read, see out, enter real and imaginary part. See, first we receive real and imaginary part of the number because we are going to add two complex number. Okay. Then the second we have to print this number. So we write void write method. Expression. Now we have to add. Okay. So first we check how we can design a add method. So it depends on the parameters. Okay. So first I add this main part. Then we are going to one more function, add function. Okay. I keep it is just as it is. Here is some add function. is there, but I have to write it depends on the main part of the program. Okay, so this function I could just blank. In void main, now we have to add three complex numbers C1, C2, and C3. These are the three complex numbers. We have to store the addition in the one variable. So CLR is the method. Now first C1 will read. That means we receive real and imaginary part on in the C1. Then C2 dot read real and imaginary part into C2. Now this addition we have to put in the variable C3. So sorry, object C3, not variable. So C3 equal to of C1. C1 will call the function add. C1 will call the function add. Okay, and passing object C2 as an argument. Passing object C2 as an argument, and whatever be the output will be there, it will store in the object C3. So assignment operator after we write C3. Now the return type is complex part. So its return type is complex. Add method is there. Complex C. Now as C1 is called, so C1 is present as it is. Now to return one, just different temp. So temp dot real is equal to C1 method call. So real part of C1 method is already present. C2 will pass an object, so it will store in the C. So we have to use C dot real temp dot imaginary equal to C1 method directly called, so imaginary part is directly present, plus C2 is passed as an object. So we write here C dot imaginary. Okay. So the object which called directly, whose data members are directly present in the function. So C1 called directly with the help of dot operator. So we'll write here real and imaginary as it is, no problem. But when C2 is passed as an object, so we have to store it somewhere. So we create one object C, and we receive the C2 in the C, and we access it by using C dot real. That means it accesses the real part of C2 object, and C dot imaginary means it access the imaginary part of C2 object. Okay. So here we have to return this temp object. So return temp. Just compile. So define a class complex in capital letter. So we have to define the complex C as a capital. Generally, we define a class name with a capital letter. It's not fixed in C++. It is small. Generally, we define it by a capital letter. Zero error. Enter the real and imaginary part, again enter the real imaginary part. Now, value is written towards C3, but we are not going to write it. So when we use the method write C3 dot write, it will going to print the real and imaginary part of this result. We just enter in real part, then imaginary part. This is the answer. So in this way, we just can pass an object as an argument, okay, and we print it, okay. So this is the uh, method. So important thing which we have to keep in mind that this function C3 is equal to C1 dot at C2. Now, very first thing you have to understand clearly C1, C2, C3, all three are objects. Okay, so all are the object. Now, when C1 call the function add, so the data members or real and imaginary part of C1 will directly present towards the function add. Okay. Now, when we pass object C2 as an argument, so it will be used by using some object, that is a C object which receive the real and imaginary part of object C2 in the object C. So we defined was one variable temp, and we define temp dot real part. So it is equal to real. So the first real define the C1, okay, real part of C1, and C dot real define the real part of the C2 object. Similarly, when we are going to define a temp dot imaginary, so temp dot imaginary means what? Temp is the object which we initiate, and imaginary is this imaginary is for the C1 and C dot imaginary for the C2. Okay, so this way we can use the real and imaginary part of the object. So the important thing is that the function which call the function directly, whose data members are present with that function directly, and the function which required or we pass as an argument need to be received by any object. So C2 will receive by the complex C. Okay, so this is all about the program. And finally, when we return this temp, so as we return the object, so the return type is the class name. Okay, and that class name we are use as the return type, and that temp is written and will receive by the object C3. So as object is written, so definitely for receiving that object we have to define one object, so we define a C3. So the thing is that in this case we can say that the C3 can behave as a variable and it can store the values. Okay, so I think it's okay for today's session. So we will continue in the next session. Thank you.